Great. Thank you, Bridget. Welcome everyone to the NEMSIS V3 implementation call on October 10th, 2018. Happens to be my wedding anniversary, by the way. Best decision I ever made. We welcome you to the call. We have a lot of important information to go over today, so thank you for joining us. Let's go ahead and dig into the agenda if we could. I think folks can see the agenda. We have a number of work groups that are very busy right now trying to finalize some decisions for 3.5.0. And I was hoping to maybe have some folks talk about the progress that's being made in a number of different fronts. And I just indicated here that maybe I can have a work group member just share some thoughts. Looking at who's on the call, I'm wondering, David Newton, if I might be able to just put you on the spot a little bit, and maybe you can describe a little bit of the work that we've been able to accomplish associated with the eDisposition 12 work group. Would you be willing to do that, Dave?
Sure. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
So we have had several meetings, more than I can count right now. And every time we think we're getting more, it's like we ask another question about, well, what about this or what about that? So I know we don't have a final product for display today, but just so y'all know, we have been incredibly thorough, and I think, Clay, you'd agree on that we are trying to ask every possible scenario, every possible, well, what about this thing, and what about, how does this state do it, and just to make sure that, when we come up with a final, how do we convert the old eDisposition 12 to this new format that we're addressing kind of every possible situation that we can think of. Clay, did you want me to go into any more detail into the different things we're doing, or just kind of that?
Yeah, David, that's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing. That was a good summary of where we are with that. We truly are probably in the 95% done, and we're actually working on tools that will present the work in a meaningful way, hopefully, so folks can easily consider the changes and be able to see what's being considered there. I know we have a DMC call next week, so I'm hoping that we can get this work group back together this week and maybe put some finishing touches on at least some draft information that we could present at the DMC call. So that work group is moving along very well. Thank you, David. That was helpful.
No problem.
In regards to the update for the CARES NEMSIS harmonization work group, I'll go ahead and give an update there. And Prabesh, I saw that you joined the line. If you could give an update on the e-outcomes work group. I know we have a couple requests of folks on this call, but let me cover the CARES first. So the CARES NEMSIS harmonization work group, we met and have had several work groups associated with that work. We began with just kind of data managers on the call trying to work through some ideological differences between the two standards and coming up with what we thought were good recommendations. We found out that was difficult just because we didn't completely understand the theory behind CARES, and so we actually brought in the CARES group into a combined group. We've had one group meeting. NHTSA has requested to kind of help us with this work, and so they have scheduled 3 additional work group meetings in October. The next one I think is coming up on October 18th, and so this group hasn't met for about a week and a half or so, but they'll get back on track. We have 3 work groups set up to be completed by the end of October, so that work is going well. I feel comfortable about that. And then we had our first meeting of the outcomes work group yesterday. Prabesh, do you want to talk a little bit about what we plan to do with that group, and if we have some asks among folks on the call?
Sure. Thanks, Clay. So we actually had the first work group call yesterday about the outcomes. It's been in the works since last year, and I think this year we've made really good progress. We basically decided right now that the first thing that we need to to make this happen and move forward is kind of go to the vendors and the EMS providers and see if they're using this outcome data set or the outcome fields. How are they using it, and what value are they seeing in fields? So we're basically trying to gather all the data sets and all the points that we're collecting on the provider side, or what the vendors are collecting, and how the state's using it. So right now, I think one thing I would request is if anybody wants to join the group, it's still open. The more voices we have on this, the better it is. I think that's where we're at with that, Clay.
Right. Yeah. Thank you very much. We send out a request to the data managers just using their listserv to provide us with any list that their state is thinking about implementing or has implemented that relates to patient outcome data that they'd like to come back into the EPCR. I've had several states respond today, so that's fantastic. We'll be collecting all the information associated with all of those lists, and so aggregating the lists, look at the frequency with which each of the elements is kind of being requested across the country, and that will really help kind of inform Pravesh and Richard Hale, who's leading this group, as to what elements should probably be considered for e-outcome. And then, Pravesh, I think the other thing that was talked about on the call is that you folks would be interested in having a data manager on that call. It's mostly vendors, and so if you are a data manager who is currently working with some system in your state that's actually exchanging data and having some outcome data come back into an EMS patient care report for use for performance measure uses or other uses, and have some experience, or you're in a state that's kind of down the road, connecting to an HIE or something, we'd love to have you join that call to make sure that we have good representation from the state side. So that would be great. So just feel free to either email me, Pravesh, or Richard, and would love to have you join that group. All right. Any questions about the weekly work that's being done either on eDisposition 12, CARES, NEMSIS harmonization, or a revitalization of the e-outcome section in NEMSIS? All right. Thank you, David and Pravesh, for helping with those sections. The next item on the agenda is to talk a little bit about the current web services error codes that are available. And we had some good discussions with Adam last week about some issues that they're seeing from their side, and maybe the need to revisit some of those codes. Adam, do you want to maybe describe the issue a little bit that kind of brought this to the forefront, and then maybe describe a path forward that may be helpful?
Sure. I brought this up basically because we were working through a number of backlog where we've submitted records to states, and we've gotten request handles back, and we continually submit the retrieve status and try to get a status, but nothing comes back. So obviously there's some lost in the system type of records. And as I was going through the documentation, I realized we'd never really put together maybe a general consensus on what how to respond to some of the error codes, and how long we should wait for that kind of thing. So it basically fell into two buckets. I guess the first bucket is both a sender and receiver question, and the second bucket is more of just a state vendor type question. So the first one was basically if for people that send a record in, and they keep requesting from the state system, whoever it may be, a retrieve status, how long do you wait? First, I was going to say I didn't come with any presentation because every time I thought about putting together like a graph or something like that, I didn't have enough information yet. So really what I'm trying to get out of this call is maybe some emails or discussion on the phone call right after this to say what everyone else does, so we can try to maybe talk about a consensus and some like rules to follow, that kind of thing. So the first question was for both us who send records in as well as those who receive. If somebody sends in a retrieve status and it doesn't come back, do you wait? How many days do you guys typically wait before it's like a permanent fail and you try to resend that record, or if you resend that record? It probably wouldn't make sense to do a number of times, because you could basically retrieve a status every 10 minutes if you wanted to, or once a day. So I'm just wondering if maybe days is the right measure to use. So that's question one. Like, if how many days do you guys really wait for retrieve statuses to come back before you consider it permanently failed, and do you follow up and resend a record? And then question number two revolves around the generic server error. So the -20, -21, -22. So those are all server error items. So one's generic, the other one's a database connection, and the next one is a file system network I/O issue. So the question there is primarily for the state side people, if you send that back, do you expect is that a permanent fail, or is that something that's like, hey, try to resend that record in again? And just basically looking for feedback along those lines. So I told Lisa when she called me about talking that I would start calling people out, just to make some friendly conversation. So I could certainly pick on someone first. Let's see, Dave Saylor, when you send a retrieve status, do you guys keep checking every couple of days, or when do you consider it dead? Is he even on the phone call? I didn't even check that.
Yeah, I don't think Dave's on the call. Looks like we have Image Trend, AMR's on the call, Jeff with the EMS pick, John with Intermedics, Keenan with Zoll. We got some folks from Stryker, Emergency Reporting. Yeah, a lot of folks. So
Image Trend, you could probably answer. Like, how about from the vendor, from the state side? If we get a request handle back, and we keep sending a retrieve status, how long would you consider it to be? Like, what's the normal processing time that we could wait? Try it for 7 days and then quit, or what's your recommendation?
This is Troy with Image Trend. I guess I don't really have the information necessary to answer that question right at this time. I know that we have processes in place, of course, to hit that, but I don't know what we're doing in terms of the amount of wait time or what we're doing on particular status retrievals, things like that.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. That's why I figured maybe if I'd phrase a question and send it around in an email. But if anyone had any ideas to further develop that question before I send it out to people, ask me now so I can help clarify.
From the Intermedics side, we check every 15 minutes for all time.
All time? Yeah.
Yep, we just keep checking, and we have a list that we check again.
Yeah, that's kind of where we've came up to, because we kept checking as well, and then we realized there's such a backlog that it just slowed down one day to the point that we weren't getting responses. We weren't getting through all the files to check. So that's why I was trying to figure out a good consensus on when to stop checking on a certain record and maybe send it again, or just consider it failed, that kind of thing.
So Adam,
go ahead, Lisa. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was just going to read a message we received in chat from Samantha with ESO that they call back for up to 2 weeks.
Okay.
Hey, Adam, it's Keenan from Zoll. Question for you. Are you talking specifically about when you get the zero statuses, or when there's just no response at all for the request handle?
Yeah, I think particularly the zero status. So we've sent it in. We got a request handle. We got the zero. It's currently processing, not yet complete. But then every time we call retrieve status, it still comes back zero. So we never really get an answer. So at some point we kept trying and realized that that could build a giant backlog if enough records from various states across the nation don't get a response back.
I think that's something we've all started to see, especially within the last year or so. And I think that when we originally did our original design, we were thinking that all of the receive systems would be able to sort of process near real time, so the processing would take less than 24 hours. So I think we've learned a lot in the last year or so that that's not necessarily true, and we've had to sort of pivot around that internally.
Yeah, and this is Clay. I'm speaking a little. I may be a little naive here because I don't completely understand the processes, but there are receive systems that are set up within state hardware, and I think there's also been some market delays we're seeing associated with state systems that just don't have the bandwidth. And so, as Keenan mentioned, I think it even could vary by state as to how quickly records are received and processed.
Yeah, I know it could get complicated and have every state give some expectation, but I mean, even a given, they could take the system down for 2 weeks, or not 2 weeks, sorry, 2 days or something like that, or 24-hour downtime, and then just that 24-hour could create a large backlog. And while their normal response status would be like, yes, within 48 hours, just taking it down for a day could turn it into a week. So we'd have to maneuver and try to figure out, change kind of fluidly what we'd expect. But I guess I was just trying to get some idea of what everyone's doing, and so we could all generally follow the same rules. So it's not, for example, if we try, if we try for up to 2 weeks, we don't send it, then something like ESO does, if we all do something similar, be it 10 days, be it 2 weeks, that then no one could come back and say like, well, why didn't you keep trying after 2 weeks? Well, the general consensus was like that we'd try for 10 days to 2 weeks, and then we wouldn't try again. That's all I'm looking for, just so we all somewhat follow the same rules. It doesn't have to be exact, but some general idea.
Yeah, Adam, this is Clay. I think that's a great idea. I mean, we could either I think what you're saying, and I think it's a really good idea, is maybe coming up with a statement about timing that we kind of add to the standard. That makes good sense. Does it add value to the technical flow of records to have error codes that have times associated with them? I mean, would that help automate a process if we did have say we had a 2 week, try for 2 weeks or something like that statement? Would it add value to extend the codes or to add time frames on some codes? Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm following where you're going, I mean, if there's instead of just a zero, not yet complete, if there is a week delay code, a month delay code, something like that. I mean, there's all kind of logic, I guess, if the receiving systems would even have the ability to analyze that and respond with an expected delay, or if it's just so fluid that they wouldn't be able to code that in somehow. Or even if it's simple, just a delay, like some expectation that zeros would be, if you get a 0, then it should be processed in 48 hours. But if it's another negative code, that it could be up to a month. I don't know.
Yeah. Good thoughts. Other thoughts from folks? There's clearly a lot of vendors on the call. Other thoughts about coming up with some kind of this?
Yeah, and that's even part 1. The part 2 is just if we get the generic server error codes from a receiving system. Is that a try again, or is that something's wrong with the file? It needs to be fixed. Because the way they're written makes it seem like it's a server error, so we should try again. That maybe there was just a temporary database connection or a network file I/O on the receiving side, and that we should try again. So that's the rule that we follow. But I wanted to make sure that that's what everyone else did, and that's what's expected. So don't keep sending records into the receiving agency and creating a bigger flood.
Yeah, thoughts from other vendors?
This is Samantha at ESO. We consider the -20 a network error, and we do resend. And then one other thing I wanted to say, we have seen this increase in status code zeros for a long delay, we have been finding once we do a lot of investigation that it's been a configuration error, and we should have gotten a minus code back that we did not get from the receiving system. So that's been our experience so far.
Yes, Samantha, that's a good comment. Could you describe a little bit more detail in regards to like a configuration error, what you would have expected to see, what might have been helpful to see?
So far, the ones that we have been able to identify, they should have been -3s, -4s, or -5s.
Got it.
So Samantha, you're saying you got in touch with whoever administers the state system, and they looked in their own system and said, "Oh yeah, that failed validation," or something like that. But what you were getting was that it was still processing.
Yes, working through it with state data managers, we've identified that.
Okay.
Other comments from other vendor folks? Appreciate the comments. This has been a really healthy conversation. Other comments related to this issue?
So from this is Ryan, Vendormedics, I guess from the perspective of an EPCR provider trying to send information to the state, I suppose if there was an error code, that's okay. But if it's a recoverable error based on like a validation error, that then my software might let me, make some changes and resubmit or do some other things like that. I don't know that a time limit is a good idea. Why not just keep asking if there's been an update? I'm trying to understand the drive behind imposing some kind of a cutoff on when a record may be accepted or not.
Oh, it's simply just kind of bandwidth, and if enough back up over time. So we've been pumping through NEMSIS 3 records for a couple years now, and more states come on board. It's just a slow build-up. So if you never cut it off at some point, then you're always asking the same ones over and over and over again, and your live time of transferring and getting statuses just grows, and the entire process just takes longer, and you're just wasteful. Know what I mean?
Sort of.
Okay. It mostly revolves around it mostly revolves around not getting a status back. I mean, if you get a failed level schematron, we don't keep asking, is it any better? I hope that was clear. It mostly revolves around that, hey, we're still expected data processing is not yet complete, or maybe even nothing, other than just a request handle back. So then it just slowly builds up over time, and you're always just keep asking for the same ones over and over again. You never really know.
So I guess in that case, is a expiration date on asking treating the symptom or treating the disease?
Yeah, I know what you mean. So there's probably a failure of some kind on the receiving side that it never responds back. That maybe their backlog is on receiving is so large, or it just got lost in the pipe. An ID, got lost somewhere, and it never responds. So no, it's not necessarily the solution, but it would at least we could. If you do get an expiration, then you could potentially resend that record and it would fix itself, kind of thing, because you'd resubmit it.
Okay, I think I understand.
Yeah, just ideas. Like I said, I was just exploring what everyone else did. So if there's other ideas that how to solve that, that's cool.
Yeah, I think this is Clay. This is a great discussion, and from our point of view, of course, we're charged with collecting as many quality records as we possibly can. So if ESO is will drop something after 2 weeks, or and another a company has another time frame, and perhaps maybe someone even has a much shorter time frame, we'd want to get a handle on that, I think, for sure. And if that's kind of complicated by the fact that unspecific error codes are coming back that don't provide a mechanism to investigate the issue, is that where we're kind of coming down to as the two major things, is maybe consistency in resending and not using specific enough error codes or process codes?
Yeah. I mean, certainly that's what kind of started this. And you would think that a lot of the providers, EMS providers, wouldn't care too much, but we started, providing these kind of reports on what's the status of everything. You have 50 passed and 2 that failed, and 100 that haven't had a response yet. So people are actually paying attention, and so they are asking us about, like, why isn't there a response yet? So we have to go research it and try to figure it out. So
yeah, right, and we're seeing that
more than just us as a vendor being curious. It's actually some of the admins want to know since they're doing all this work, what's happening to them.
Yeah, we're seeing this on the national side too, where states are looking at their reports that we provide, and they're saying, well, why is the last record that I see in this surveillance dashboard, why is it 2 weeks ago, kind of a thing, and so we've had to deal with a little bit of that as well on our side. So, well, sounds good, Adam. Where do you want to go from this? Do you want to should we go ahead with a survey that asks each of the compliant vendors what they do in regards to when they receive a -0?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly the first one, and even just a short little block to explain if on the receiving end, I was thinking of writing that up somehow to say, like, okay, well, I'm a process and receive vendor. This is what I've seen cause causing backups or something. Just get some information on what's happening to some of these.
Okay, that sounds good. I think we'd be happy to put together just a little doodle poll that maybe folks could fill out in just a couple minutes, just to inform us a little bit more about the issue and see if there are some changes we can make just to facilitate the flow of records. All right. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right.
Hey, Clay, something this is Prabhash from Administrator, and something that I just thought of right now. I don't know if this has been already talked about or not, but when we return the 0 on the done processing side, going back to how AWS does it right now, is to actually put a number of days parameter on it. Basically, what that means is that status of 0 is valid for this much time, and the next retrieve status, if you pass in this state, it'll actually give you back a new status, or if that, then a generic failure status comes back. I'm not sure if this has been talked about or is it given an option or not.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's been discussed in the past at all, Pravish.
Okay. Adam, I'll probably get in touch with you sometime and talk through this, see if that actually works out for you guys and if this is even a solution or not.
Yeah, no, I mean I'm familiar with a little bit about the AWS stuff.
Okay.
For the days. Yep.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. That's a great last minute idea. Fantastic. All right. For item number 5, Lisa, did you want to take that over? It looks like you just sent a link that folks can go to, and I'll do that as well.
Great, and I can, Clay, if it's okay, I'll just share my screen. Oh, okay, that's great.
Yeah. So
in the past couple of weeks, Clay has reviewed the new v3.50 web pages on NEMSIS.org, and we were previously linking to our JIRA project to look at the different requests that have come through that have been approved. And it wasn't a very easy way to track progress. Everything was kind of just in a big list. So Laurel Bader has actually created a table that mirrors our Kanban board, and so that you can easily track progress on the revision. So for example, here in the first column, you'll see backlog, and this includes all approved changes. And then the next column is selected for development, meaning Clay and team have have created the business solution. So Clay, if you wouldn't mind maybe just opening one of these. And if you scroll down here under comments, you'll see the proposed business solutioning. So every one of these items that's in that selected for development will have this information. And then if we go back to the table, then as we start actually modifying the XSD and doing development activities, it'll move into in progress. And then when that's done and it's ready and it's been tested and it's been ready for deployment, which will happen next year, it'll get moved to done. So you should see almost every day some progress in this table. And when you click on those links, it just takes you straight to the JIRA project. So what we'll do, I wanted to share this with this team first, but what we'll do in the next day or so is update the link on the NEMSIS.org webpage so that it brings you directly here. Are there any questions or comments about this? Okay, great. Thanks, Clay. Okay, so I think the next item is to review the maintenance downtime. So every month we have a Tuesday and a Wednesday where we perform maintenance, and so that's to apply the latest patches, upgrades, just any kind of activity that supports our production environment. So for this month, that landed yesterday and today. We didn't do any maintenance yesterday, but we are doing that currently today. And so I sent out a note this morning, indicating that you might see some intermittent downtime on our production services, but there shouldn't be, just as previous maintenance periods, there shouldn't be, I'd say, more than 30 minutes to 45 minutes of downtime on anything. But if you have any questions or you're running into any issues or seeing anything strange, feel free to reach out to me by calling or emailing anytime. So this will impact production services such as our website, the data submission service, the V2 Cube, validators, and other services like that.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Any questions related to the downtime or to the changes that have been made to the public JIRA site? Great, thank you, Lisa. Appreciate you describing those. Josh, I heard your name on the phone. Do you want to give kind of a brief update regarding what's going on with the performance measure service testing? I know testing probably just started today, but maybe you can talk a little bit about the resources that you've made available to folks that are testing.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So a couple of weeks ago on this call, I talked about the NEMSIS v3 performance measure web service and that it was finally nearing a point where we'll be preparing it for production release. And so the final phase that we're going through starting today is stakeholder testing. 4 vendors have contacted me, software developers who will be testing the service. I sent them documentation yesterday that will help them get up and running with testing this service. Test window starts today, and we would like testing to be completed by next Friday, October 19th. If there are any additional software developers besides the 4 that I'm already working with who would like to test the service, just send me an email. It's josh@joshualegler.com. I'll put that in the chat box. And just let me know that you'd like to also participate in the testing of the performance measure web service. And I'll just send you back an email with some resources and a little bit of guidance on what we're looking for as far as testing of that service. So I'm excited that we have a project that's on track now, released for testing on schedule this time, and I welcome the feedback that we're going to receive over the next week and a half, and then we'll get it ready for a production release. So that's about it, unless anyone has any questions on this. Okay, back to you, Clay.
All right, thank you, Josh. Appreciate that update. All right, the last item that we have on the agenda is to discuss kind of some preliminary findings associated with suggested lists. So folks may remember when we met in Deer Valley earlier this year, we talked about what we can do to improve the precision of our suggested list, the consistency, and particularly ease of use. One of the ideas that was shared was now that we have a substantial amount of V3 data, could we take a look and see whether or not the suggested list, for example, are capturing the bulk of patient attributes or scene attributes that the providers are putting in, or whether it's just kind of all over the map and the suggested lists really aren't helpful. We talked about ideas of having a more defined list that we check with compliance processes, and maybe having a roll-up type of process. So I did want to just share a little bit of progress that we've made in that regard. So we've taken a look at what was provided in 2017. So we've finished that data set. There were 1,300 causes of injury recorded under e-injury 01. And I just want to begin by showing you the suggested list that we have provided for that element. And so, of course, we do a tier system to hopefully help with kind of a standard navigation kind of associated with the chosen code. So here's the chosen codes. Folks have certainly seen this before. then what we did is we took that 1,300 codes, and we have indicated a frequency count here, and we just have a rough key where to kind of help you visually look at this. If there was a frequency of 500 or less, it's red. It is 500 to 1,000, and then or over 1,000, and then a max is at least 3,000 EPCRs listing that code, and then. Here we have the 1,300 codes, and then in this column E, we indicate with just a check or an X here whether that value is found on the suggested list. And so as you kind of go down through here, you can see, for example, a suicide attempt. We chose that as a value that's important. I mean, as you look down through here, you see there's lots of one-offs. And even for some codes that we've chosen, there's just been not a lot of calls or value or uses of that value. Now, right, we have in that list codes for like aircraft injuries and things like that, where you wouldn't expect to see a lot of codes every year, but perhaps it's a distinct and unique code. So the fact that some of these are low, kind of associated with whether or not there's a comment on the suggested list, makes sense. But there are. This is a good exercise, right? As you go through here, you can see there's lots of red where we have a value in our suggested list. Maybe a good thing. I'm going to run down just real quick to V43 here and maybe show kind of an example here. Also, you'll see there's clearly places, and maybe I've gone too fast here, but there's places where folks are using a code quite often, and we don't have a code listed. And in fact, perhaps this is a good one to look at, right? So if you look at kind of the parent code or the stem code that's over here in column A, you can see that we did have a choice in this parent code, but clearly there are other codes being used, and even with great frequency, right, that just aren't associated with this parent code. This kind of speaks to kind of what Ryan was talking about up in Deer Valley about the idea of just can we just roll this all up to VO3 and be okay with that. My question, perhaps, to vendors who have worked with their agencies is I wondered why it was important for a provider to list a VO 3.9 versus a VO 3.1. And I'll restate that, perhaps. I'm just wondering if this level of specificity is required. So clearly we can provide it, but and just roll these up, but I also fear that it's complicating our provider's ability to quickly move through our elements. If we all just used VO 3.1 at the point of data entry, are there drawbacks to that, I guess, is the question I'm asking, and would love to have some comments related to that.
So Clay, I'll
say. Hey, Clay.
Oh. we both waited the requisite amount of time to be polite, and then immediately started talking. Please go ahead and go first.
Yes. Hey, this is Elizabeth. One of the things that I'm sorry, I have a lot of noise here. One of the things that we do more specific is like sometimes insurers require very specific descriptions of the cause of injury, and if there is a very general one, we can never go back to the exact one, you know.
Right.
So if a clinician doesn't fill it out, there is no way to go back to a specific one if an insurance requires it.
Right, so that's a great question, Elizabeth. And so you're saying that you have some insurance companies that are requesting specific ICD-10 CM codes for elements like cause of injury?
Yes, that happens, and not just cause of injury for impression too. You need to be specific.
Okay, thank you. Ryan, did you have a comment?
Yeah, also, we've noticed that there are times where the department will want to have more than one choice, or the highest level of choice doesn't sound like what they want it to sound like, and so they'll pick a choice further down that fits or seems more like the kind of language that they would want to use. And I'm sorry I don't have a specific example, but it's sort of a they use the specificity to provide a greater number of choices to their users.
Right, you're right. I think a good example is here, right? So here we have V301, a pedestrian injured in collision with a car, a pickup or van in a traffic accident. And here, for example, we have a couple of people that wanted to add a 9 to that, right? So VO3.19, because the pedestrian was on snow skis when they collided with the car, the pickup, the truck, or the van. So that's what you're kind of saying, right? Is they're looking for more specificity in this specific element just to describe the scene or something?
Right.
And so that's a great comment, Ryan. And so this gets back to your idea that you shared based on the work group where we were talking a little bit about allowing codes to be as specific as necessary at the local level, and just rolling up to the state into parent codes or something like that, kind of for the state or national level. I would just ask if there are any states on the call. I haven't kind of looked at the group yet. If there are data managers, do they see, for their purposes, which are mostly for research or to kind of provide high-level characterizations of care and clearly to help with some high-level benchmarking, if we were using parent codes and reporting parent codes back at the state level versus more specific codes, if that would not provide them with the specificity that they feel they need?
Yeah, this is Sharon in Nebraska.
Hi, Sharon.
And I know the supervisor that I currently have, he is very interested in being able to keep the specificity because he looks at, which it is, the patient care record as a legal document should the out-of-field provider ever be called into court on an incident. So he's not looking at it as much as a research type thing, that he wants to keep the specificity, well, probably at some point, but he leans more towards the legal document and what would be needed if someone was called into court.
Yeah, great comment, Sharon. Thank you. That's true.
This is Ridgely. Wouldn't narrative be able to fill in those gaps, though? I mean, I understand wanting to get specific if you have specific research questions on these things for the codes, but for like the legal side of it, I would think the narrative could fill in those gaps.
I don't know. You have to talk to him about that one.
I'm sure that helps for sure. Yeah.
From California's perspective of it, while the narrative could help, there's no way with 4.2 million runs a year, we could ever even touch that. The volume would kill us. So we're
no. I'm talking about. She was worried about legal purposes. So that's where the narrative is helpful.
But even from that side of it, just in volume alone, that would kill us. The detail is essential.
And this becomes a bit of a sticky wicket. I mean, if you read through even these ones associated with VO3, it's really it's really hard to determine which one actually adds more value, right? So if you look at the one that we chose in a suggested list that the data manager's chosen, so VO3.1, it's pedestrian injured on collision with car, pickup, truck, or van in traffic accident. But then the next most commonly used is VO3.9, pedestrian injured in collision with car, pickup, truck, or van, unspecified whether traffic or non-traffic accident. So again, I don't know how much more specificity that adds, right? So just trying to ease the burden on our providers here and determining how we can help them most. I think on the backside, except for the legal question, I mean the backside, there's clearly technical approaches that can be taken to roll these things up that can be standardized and shared among states and things like that. I just want to make sure that we're trying mostly to help our providers not feel such an incredible burden trying to find codes, and we continue to hear that that's an issue. So,
Clay, on the two that were the two highest, did you do any analysis of like whether both of those codes were used in the same states, or it's like one is used in certain states and the other one's used in other states?
Oh, that's a great question. We haven't done that kind of an analysis yet, but clearly that's a really good thought, Ridgely. As you go through this, I mean, particularly folks that are using this extension of an A here on to indicate that this was an initial visit. It's a common fourth character in ICD-10-CM. I think that's used mostly on the the hospital side kind of a thing. We do have some vendors or some states, I think, that are using that type of an approach.
The question is, are they using it? Are they using it on purpose, or are they using it because somebody? I feel like somebody told somebody somewhere along the lines that more specific is better, and worrying about billing and things like that.
Yeah. Maybe that gets back to what Elizabeth was saying. I didn't know that there were specific codes for like cause of injury that insurance companies were asking for.
But is that like, but then the other side of that is I also heard, and I don't know for sure on any of this, is that people were worried about that, but then when they went back to the billing department said that they weren't going to use those codes, that they looked, that it wasn't going to affect billing, basically, from this point of view.
Right.
Well, and in the example that Elizabeth talked about, it's probably not so much an ambulance billing issue as it is the insurance company reimbursing the patient or whoever was, covering the cost of whoever was at fault.
Oh, is that true, Elizabeth? Are these insurance claims you're talking about?
I'm not completely sure, so I don't want to overstate my thing, but in general, yeah, more specific is better.
Okay, yeah. Are there folks, maybe vendors and state data managers, are there folks that feel like this level, this column B, this level, 1,300 causes of injuries, is this too specific?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we roll it up into the upper levels ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it becomes a little bit more manageable for sure. All right. Well, we'll present the same information on the data manager's call next week, and kind of get their feel of it. There's another tab I'll just show you quickly. This is a tab where we just include the values that are, well, let me make this a little bit smaller. We just include the values that are in the suggested list, and then we indicate how often they were used. And so you can see that sometimes we hit the mark pretty well, and other times there may be other codes that folks are using associated with that parent code that is more oftenly utilized. So we'll talk about this more in the DMC call. We'll make this spreadsheet available so folks can take a harder look at it. We're working on primary impressions right now. It has 1,700 primary impressions, and so it's taking us a little bit longer to build this kind of a report, but we're well on our way to finishing that one as well. So, all right, just to keep folks kind of up to date with what we're trying to provide to help us see if we can resolve this issue in some way to make it easier for our providers. Any other questions about the tact that we're taking? Are there other attributes? Ridgely mentioned a great idea looking at who's using specific codes. We'll attempt to get into that. That's easily something that we can do. Are there other ideas that folks feel like we should be investigating associated with this that might help clarify this issue more? Okay. All right. Well, we'll continue on our current quest to fill this out for our areas of concern. All right.
Hey, Clay, I have one question for you.
Uh-huh.
The table that you just showed was all of version 3 data, like aggregated together, the totals?
Right. Yeah. So this is pulled from the 2017 data set, which is all V3. It includes 8 million EMS activations in the final data set. And so it's
if you thought about repeating this under newer stuff, because maybe some states are pushing more, like we are. We're pushing more of that suggested list than we had in the past. So I'm wondering, is it on much more recent data? Is it as big of an issue as it was in 2017?
Oh, interesting. So maybe if we looked at some of the later 2018 data, maybe the numbers, the sheer number is smaller, and it may be kind of coagulating down on its own. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Okay, we can take a look at that for sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, super. Other comments related to this topic? Okay, great. Thanks, David. That's a good idea. All right, I think that was the last formal item we had on the agenda. Are there other topics? We always try to save a couple of moments here at the end to see if folks have other topics that they'd like to discuss on the call, or like us to prepare another topic for a future call. We'd be happy to do that. Any other topics folks wish to discuss? All right. Looks like we're scheduled to meet next on October 24th, and we'll also be rescheduling some of the calls in November and December. So we'll get that reschedule calendar out to folks soon as well. So thank you for your comments today. Thank you for participating. This really helps us to ensure that we're continuing to improve our experience for providers and help you in any way that we can. So it's vitally important that you join and share your comments. Thanks so very much. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks.